Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, Fader night, a memorial, a little party for Stanton T. Friedman. We're going to have some special guests that are coming by, and, of course, open lines all night long. And that's it. We're going to share our favorite Stan moments. And we've got many, and I've got lots of pictures to post, too, as well. So that'll be tomorrow night. Tonight, it's James Fox. He's here to talk about the release of his new film, Phenomenon. He was born in England, raised in New York and California. He began his journalism career early in life as an assistant to his father, who was a writer, Charles Fox. Together, they traveled on many magazine assignments, interviewing such notables as Stephen Hawking and race car legend Dan Gurney for the likes of Rolling Stone, Car and Driver to Sports Illustrated. James finished and sold his first documentary to Discovery by the time he was 28. He has since completed and distributed TV projects for Sci-Fi, The Learning Channel, Nat Geo. History Channel has made frequent appearances on, of course, Larry King Live, Nightline, Dateline, Anderson Cooper, and others. His documentaries, Out of the Blue and I Know What I Saw, are two of the most respected films in ufology. And tonight we are going to discuss his next film, The Phenomenon, which is now set for major theatrical release later this year by The Orchard. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black director James Fox. James, good evening, my friend. How are you?
I gotta meet this guy.
I know, he's cool.
I gotta meet myself. I can't. Wow.
Yeah, you know what though? When you meet, never contradict him in public. Don't do it. At least that's the rumor. That's the rumor. How are you?
You're missing the finger wag there. I'm doing great. Approaching the end of a rather long, hard slog. So all the things that one associates with the final push are present in my life. The stress and the cramping of all my muscles and the sleep deprivation.
All of that, and certainly, James, the elephant in the room, right? Which is, do you feel the pressure of topping, Out of the Blue and I Know What I Saw? Because how those two films are regarded in ufology. The expectations from this community are very, very high. Do you feel that pressure?
Tremendously, yes, I do. And here's the thing. I remember when I finished I Know What I Saw, and meeting the deliverables for Amy was nearly impossible. I remember reading critics and feeling personally assaulted and thinking, you guys have no idea what I went through to get this movie onto air. But before we sold it to A&E, I had a deal in the works with Lionsgate. And it wasn't just the financial gain, which would have been great, but the global footprint that they had for distribution would have been just amazing for that film.
Sure.
And we were going up through the ranks, and finally we got into acquisitions. I was bubbling over with excitement. I mean, really. And they took a pass. And they said, well, the film production values are slightly subpar. This was 10 years ago. So, we've got different, frame rate issues and shot on different formats, and they took a pass. So I said to myself right then and there, I will never, ever make that mistake again. So with this film, I hired a National Geographic photographer by the name of David West. He's phenomenal. And, got really high-end equipment. I hired audio guys. And if I didn't have the money, I raised the money. I didn't settle for less. So the end result is sort of a 60-minute style, film on the topic of UFOs, which quite frankly is never, I haven't seen it done before. When you look at this, it looks like 60 Minutes production. I mean,
yeah,
it, really
it does. It does. It does.
I'm very proud of that, And then on top of that, if I'm rambling, just tell me to shut my pie hole. But on top of that, I was working with a guy. They always say you want your partner to be smarter than you. Well, the guy I'm working with is about 100 times smarter than me. And he's been amazing in helping stitch all the stories together in a cohesive narrative that holds the viewer and that has purpose, not just banging the audience over and over again with well, this case happened, then this case happened, and this case happened. There's a meaning behind that, and there's a destination. There's a place where the film's going, and that's really exciting. It's been challenging.
Now,
and the film currently. Sorry.
Well, no, I actually want to jump in and interrupt you for a second because I have seen clips of the film as it is, over the years. You have sent me a few things, and I thank you for that. But I sat back looking at these clips and the quality of what is going on, and it just made me angry because this is a film that I would want to make. And I see the excellence of what is going on. I'm talking about the framing. I'm talking about the cinematography. And then I'm looking at these interviews and who you have managed to get on camera. And I've even asked you, can you share some of this with me? Can I get to some of these witnesses? And you pulled it off. It is eye candy. And I could literally do a film on every single high target interview person that we've gotten, and some of which that we nearly got to. I mean, we got very close to some even higher level people. I mean, really, as close as you could possibly get, like a letter from them saying, "Hey, we're seriously considering meeting with you," and but yeah, it's been a. They say it takes a village. There's been some very influential people in the field. George Knapp, one of them, but a handful of others as well, that have been instrumental in pulling strings behind the scenes for us. And I'm forever grateful. Well, let's cut to the chase because we've got limited time tonight and we've got a lot to talk about. So let's cut to the chase. One of the there's okay. I'm going to tantalize the audience with these two bits of information. Number one, this is going to have a theatrical release across the country by The Orchard, and it's a tentative 700 screens. Now, for you, that's got to be the most exciting thing that a director could have.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that appears to be the direction this is moving in, and I am cautiously optimistic. Everyone has seemed to be very impressed with the rough cut that we've shared. It's going to get a lot better. Peter Coyote is going to narrate. We're going to hire,
Wait. Who's going to narrate?
Peter Coyote.
You can't just say drop Peter Coyote and keep talking. You got Peter Coyote. Okay, so let's sit back and discuss what you just said. This film, very anticipated. It's incredible, but it's going to be a major theatrical release, and you've got Peter Coyote doing the narration.
Yeah, I know. Well, what's funny is that he narrated out of the blue.
Yes.
And so he's been familiar with some of my previous works, and I sent him clips from this one, and his only response was, "Boy, this is a game changer." He was like, "This film's going to make waves." And I quite honestly, I totally agree with him. I really feel like, this could be, let's say, the tipping point, but it's if it gets the level of distribution that we're moving in that direction with, I can't imagine that it's not going to really influence a lot of people into reconsidering what they thought of the topic of UFOs. And I say this as well because I have some very skeptical friends. I have scientist friends, people that have been kind of making fun of me over the decades, And I had a screening probably about a month ago, about 15, 20 people. And I stopped the film at the end and put the lights on, and the room was kind of quiet. And I thought, well, that's not a good sign. And then I kind of waited, and they all looked at me and they said, "Boy, this is really hard to refute. I mean, this is about as compelling as I've ever seen. In fact, this is the most compelling thing I've ever seen. I need to process what I just saw." So I thought, well, that's a really good sign. So I'm very optimistic. I'm super excited. I think this is the film that we've all been waiting for.
And when most think about now, I did my top 10 UFO documentaries, right, at the beginning of the show. And when we think about what is a good UFO documentary, a few things do come to mind. You've made two of the best, but, a few things, come to mind. But the approach here, and certainly from the clips that I have seen, that the approach here is not only cinematic, but to talk about and investigate and present cases that haven't been out in front of the public eye in the past. But I want to discuss that. But it's also the opening sequence of the film. And we're going to be running, and thank you for the images, by the way. We're running those now on Twitter. But
cool.
Tell us about the opening sequence and what lengths you went to make this special.
Okay, so I've always loved James Bond films, and what I love about James Bond, I love everything about him, but what I particularly love about James Bond films, trying to say that fast 10 times, is the cold opens they have. They just get right to the action. And I remember about 5 years ago or so, 5, maybe pushing 6, I was just getting the film off the ground. It was in very, very early stages. And there were a handful of people that I was trying to get to, one of which was Colonel William P. Coleman, who's public spokesman for Project Blue Book, the Pentagon, who had an extremely dramatic encounter with a flying saucer while piloting a B-25 in 1955 over Alabama, along with a couple of engineers from Allison Engines and Boeing in the plane with him. And no one, as far as I could tell, had ever gotten him on camera about this, which was shocking to me, And I remember at the time I kept saying, "Got to go get this guy. Got to get this guy." And my financial backer was going, "Just calm down, man. We got to put together a plan, and we're gonna go after these. Don't worry, just cool your jets." I said, "No. We got this guy is so important." I made such a stink that finally he was like, "Okay, go, go." And I can't remember how much money I needed, but it was quite a bit because I got really good professional audio and lighting, and it looks beautiful. Sat him down at his house, and we interviewed him for about 5 hours. And I looked over at my camera guy, this guy David West, and we looked at each other, and he knew. We go, "This is going to be the opening of the whole movie." I knew it right on the spot because it's it's not just the how compelling and exciting the actual encounter is, because it's absolutely amazing.
Yes.
But it's who is saying it. This guy was like part of Project Blue Book.
Right.
This is a World War II pilot. This is a guy that was on the inside. And so, long story short, Lee Spiegel actually helped find the airplane, and we found a 1942, I think it was, B-25 bomber. And after months of negotiations, we hired it over actually kind of a day and a half. And we got, and I said to the guy right at the front, I said, "Look, if you can't fly this thing at treetop level at maximum speed, then we're going to go somewhere else." He goes, "No, we can do that."
Shut up. Now, wait. So you're the director, so that means you get to fly in this thing.
I was in the belly. I was in the nose cone, which is all glass.
Oh man!
At treetop level, and with the pedal to the metal, man. It was terrifying. It was. I'll never forget it. But yeah, I was in the nose cone at treetop. Yeah.
Now.
But we put cameras everywhere, cameras on the ground, cameras inside. It's such a cool opening. Oh, my God. Everyone I show it to is like, "Holy moly, how did you guys pull this off?" Of course, I had no money when I first started this whole thing. I mean, I just like, you have a concept, you have an idea, and then you think about it, project what you want, and somehow it manifests,
How I want to continue talking about the film, but I do have to ask you, how has your view of this phenomenon, certainly the film, I mean, how's it changed over the years? Where are we today?
Because this is the first time that and if you've seen my previous works, I've never gone into the intelligence behind the phenomenon. I've never explored that angle of it.
Right.
I've always felt that we needed to take baby steps, or certainly maybe perhaps that I did. And this film, we're really digging into potential agenda, potential, everyone's going to have a different opinion on it. And I'm always maintain a fairly conservative position. But certainly we explore the intelligence behind it. I mean, I'm covering Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I mean, multiple Close Encounters of the Third Kind in this film from around the world. So that in itself is a slippery slope. I mean, you tell people like, oh, yeah, UFO landed at a school ground in Africa in 1994, and the occupants got out and interacted with roughly 60-plus school children in broad daylight. People are like, I don't know what pipe you're smoking, buddy, but you can keep on walking. I mean, who the hell's going to ever believe that? Right?
That's right. And, nobody, well, I shouldn't say nobody.
Nobody in mainstream's going to believe it. But the road to Rua, that's what we kept reminding ourselves. Every single day in the edit room, where are we going? It's the road to Rua. This film builds and culminates with contact in Africa. And if we can build a solid case where we can get even the most ardent skeptic to consider the possibility that that might have just happened,
right,
then we've done our job. And I can tell you right now, that's exactly what this film does.
You've been waiting for disclosure, right? And you've had your moments, and not to go into the past, but when we look to the future, disclosure seems imminent. Like we've never been in this position that we are in today, James, and you know this. Are we getting close? Is this film going to help push the narrative?
So, I've never been a huge proponent of any sort of government disclosure. And in some respects, it's kind of happened. I know people are going to argue with me on that one, but it kind of has happened to a certain extent, and it continues to seem to happen. There seems to be a movement. I remember 2007, 2008 was a pretty exciting time. We had a lot of stuff going on at that point. Then we had kind of a lull for a while. And then it started to peak again, obviously, with the front page of the New York Times with the ATIP story. That was certainly, and then the level of access that we've managed to get in this film, and you haven't even seen all of it. Believe me, when you see some of the other interviews we got, I mean, they're not mincing their words when they're talking about what they believe is behind the phenomenon. I mean, with the fact that it's real. And I think that with films like this, it's a safe environment. People can realize it's a safe environment. They're not going to be ridiculed. People like the people that we've interviewed have, signed off on, okay, this is a credible presentation. You're not twisting the facts. It's presented just the way it's delivered, just the way you said it was going to be delivered. And I think that's going to encourage more people to come forward, that it's not going to jeopardize their credibility by coming forward. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because a lot of people are concerned about that. And I think that with raising the bar on this, I think it'll encourage more government and military officials to feel more comfortable to come forward. And I can't imagine that not happening once this film comes out.
When we've got a few minutes before the break, and I want to discuss specifically some of these cases and that you feature in the film, and you've chosen... Well, two of the cases I think are some of the most incredible. Well, they're all some of the most incredible, but that two that just aren't discussed in ufology like they should be, and we'll talk about those, which is, of course, Melbourne and Westall and Rua. But before we'll do that after the break. But you chose to cover Lonnie Zamora and Socorro, which happened in 1964 in New Mexico. A pretty famous case if you're a student of ufology, because it's there for us and it's fairly documented. But the other part of the Lonnie case for me is it's also kind of been pushed to the side a little bit, and you chose to feature it in this film. Why?
Well, I have to give credit to Tracy Torme for that, because he was the one that was like, this case really changed everything. And it was a really, one of the most profound, credible close encounters of the third kind in modern U.S. history, well documented, part of Project Blue Book, turning point for Dr. Hynek. And I remember thinking, God, yeah, but it's 50 years old. Come on, we need to focus on more But long story short, I started delving into it more and more. And then over a 5-year period, I got to know his family and all of his friends and coworkers. And I interviewed all of them on camera. His daughter, his wife, what Lonnie would look like when he came home, the effect it had on his life, on his personal life, on his professional life. How it affected the military, how it affected the first military officer and his kids that were on the scene. It was a game changer. It was one of those cases where it's one thing to talk about unknown objects whizzing around in the sky. It's another thing to talk about creatures on the ground. So and it was chocked full of physical evidence. Even down to potential scrapings of metal from the landing gear on rocks and landing pads and burnt, scorched bushes, and it was and a police officer. You know what I mean? It's like, so we delved into it. We went to the National Archives. I actually went with Ray Stanford, who wrote the book Pentagon what was it? Flying Saucer at a Pentagon Pantry. And it wasn't exactly a flying saucer; it was more like an egg-shaped craft. But just I guess he'd call it that just for ease. But we went there and we uncovered some documents about the symbol. The original symbol was on the craft. We found that for the first time ever, and a number of other really incredible original documents, not microfilms. So we got a fresh look at the case. We've got some fresh testimony on the case.
Were you able to chase down the family that was at the gas station?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I didn't. No, I did not. Mm-mm. I don't even think I tried. Griner had talked about it. That guy, Billy, was it Billy Griner?
Yes.
Billy Griner, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah, but he didn't even know who they were, so it was like a wild goose chase. I mean, he didn't know anything about them. I don't even think he knew what their license plate was, where they're from. But there were other, Paul Kratzner and someone else. It's really funny actually. When I was in the National Archives, I was coming across correspondence to and from a number of things I learned, to and from Dr. Hynek from the local newspapers saying basically, look, there were other witnesses. This guy Paul Kratz and someone else, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but they were actually sending the names and addresses of additional eyewitness testimony to Hynek, and Hynek was recognizing that and like, hey, here's their name, here's their address, we did a report on it, go for it, kind of thing. But they were, they didn't want to have additional eyewitness testimony. I'm sure that Hynek did, but the Air Force didn't, because that bolsters the case even more, right? So, and all sorts of there was a film crew there within, I don't know, 6 or 8 months from a company called Empire Studios, and it was Dr. Frank Stranges and another guy named Michael Musto, who were producing a film on 16 color cameras on the case, and they spent like 40 minutes of the film on that specific case. And the military was super concerned about it, and they were having Hynek go and check out what was going on and why was Lonnie participating, and this is going to, resurface all these questions they were not able to answer. And I did spend about 3 or 4 years going after this film. It was called Phenomenon 7.7, I think it was, and I never found it. I never found it. But it does. Evidently, it does exist. Well, it would be color film footage of all the witnesses, all the town, everything right after it happened. It would have been priceless.
With Frank Stranges, no doubt, right? Wow.
It's eventually owned by Turner Classics. They have a little blurb on it on the internet. You can Google. I went after the owner of Turner Classics. I actually went into the library there. I mean, I went to the gentleman who produced it, Michael Musto's. He had just died. I got a hold of his wife. I went through all of her dead husband's affairs in all these storage containers. It took me weeks in the hot sun of LA with no ventilation. I went all out, man. I could not get my sticky little fingers on it. But I did, and some people in the UFO community had talked about thinking they'd seen it in the very late 60s, early 70s at Giant Rock.
Interesting. Really?
Anybody? Yeah. So if anybody's heard of it, Phenomenon 7.7.
That's I'm sitting here racking my brain when just like you, I think I've seen it all. It's my job, and I enjoy it. I seek this stuff out. I've never heard of it. Never heard of it. Let's take a break right here. Our guest tonight is James Fox, talking about his new film. It's finally here. It's called The Phenomenon. It will be in major theatrical release later on this year in 2019 by The Orchard. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, James Fox. More after this short break. Stay with us. You're listening to a preview of Fade to Black. To get the full episode, go to jimmychurchradio.com and get our podcast. Click on the podcast banner or sign up in the membership area for downloadable MP3s. Everything commercial free. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. You can follow me on Twitter right now. Join the conversation at JChurchRadio. That's what you want to do. We're posting images that James has sent us of the production, and that B-25 shot is absolutely epic. It doesn't get any more epic than that, James. The cases, let's pick up where we left off. The cases that you've chosen here, to me, are some of the best. And one of them is, we just discussed Lonnie Zamora, but in 1966, what happened in Melbourne, in Westall, outside of Melbourne, at the elementary school there. And incredible. You were able to interview some of the kids who are now adults, right?
You know, what's crazy about it is in the middle of working on that segment, I realized I'm going, wait a minute, what's the time difference? I'm going, simply kind of putting it together. I'm going, you know, we had congressional hearings on UFOs in Washington, D.C. in 1966 in April. I'm looking at it going, okay, so after the congressional hearings, as they were ending around 5 o'clock in the evening in Washington, D.C., flying saucers were landing in Australia at a school, literally at that time. So while they were probably having dinner that night, flying saucers were landing. Kamala Harris very kindly, thank God, put me in touch with a gentleman named James Rigney, who eventually they invited me to Australia to cover this case. I'm going to be honest with you, I was kind of skeptical when it comes to a school landing case. You know, broad daylight, hundreds of witnesses, like, really? How come I haven't heard about it? You know what I mean? Kind of thing.
Right.
But these researchers really plugged me in. I mean, it was actually quite a phenomenal trip. I mean, we arrived, we hit the ground running in Australia. We were there for a month and did a lot of promotional stuff. I guess, I don't know, something happened where I did a couple of radio and TV spots, and it just kind of took off, and more people came forward, and it got some just a crazy momentum, and we got people to come forward that had never come forward. We got a gentleman who took a photograph of it, had never come forward on camera. So some really great new breaks in the story, and just overall just an absolutely phenomenal case of a landing where people got within 10, 12 feet of it on the ground.
Did you just say that somebody snapped a picture? Does the picture exist?
Yes.
Did you?
I held it. I held it in my hand with a Polaroid.
Is it in the film?
Yes, of course it is.
Oh
yeah,
man, James.
Of course, of course it is. Yeah. First time ever.
You know,
we got a high resolution scan of it, of the original. I held it in my hand. I couldn't believe it.
Can I throw you under the bus a little bit and share some of our private? I'm just going to let the audience know. James and I, every time we talk on the phone, I catch myself saying, "Man, dude, I just don't like you anymore." Because you managed to pull this off. You've always been able to do that, and that's one of the holy grail situations in ufology. But when we look at the Westall case with hundreds of witnesses, a complete cover up by the local media, the newspapers, and the television stations that all covered the case. And then suddenly the media was pulled from it. Were you able to go and see the original television coverage?
Well, it's funny you should say that because I actually went on the station that covered it at the time,
Right.
and it was a wonderful researcher, Shane Ryan, who had informed me what had happened, and I had actually inquired about it while I was at the TV station. I mean, I was there going on their station, and so I was like, "Hey, what about?" They said, "Well, the box where the tape was in was still labeled, Westall UFO incident, and the tape inside was gone. And when the object landed, within 20 minutes or less of this thing taking off again, military trucks and military presence arrived. The media was interviewing the students. I mean, I talked to the students. They were telling me I was at the school. The media was there interviewing the students. The students were explaining what happened. Hundreds of people saw this, okay? And there were pilots flying overhead as well. So there's a local airport not too far down the way, and there were some small aircraft that were being, curious and flying around this thing, getting evidently dangerously close. But anyway, the military arrived, shut it down, shut everything down.
I keep interrupting you, James. I am so rude.
Okay. I'm talking too much.
But the Westall 66 documentary, which I hold way up there, it's an incredible documentary. But when you were able to go to the elementary school, and the way that they presented in the documentary, it's a well-made documentary. It's excellent. It's on every level. But I've often wondered what the view out to the field and through the trees would be in person. And you went there.
I brought my drone and I flew exactly where the flying saucer was flying. I landed my drone exactly where the flying saucer landed, exactly with the witnesses that were there. We flew the drone directly over the tower, the same power tower that was there at the time in 1966, exactly where it was initially spotted. And then we interviewed the school teacher who's never gone on the record before, the science teacher. I'm not allowed to say his name over the radio, but we interviewed him, and he explained why he'd gone dark for 50 years.
Was he the teacher that took the pictures, but they took the camera from him?
No, but there was talk of that. There was some of the students were talking about that at the time.
Right.
Going, no, don't you remember so-and-so? She had her camera.
Okay.
They weren't. It was more like hearsay, but they did talk about that incident. Now this guy lived about 12 kilometers away, and he took a photograph of it in the air right above his house. It's a very good photograph, like really good.
Like James Fox good.
I mean, I give it. It's really good. So everyone who's seen it's like, holy Jesus.
Really?
Yeah, it's really good. Points of reference, in focus. It's, I was always told from people who do photographic analysis work with UFOs that if it's a crystal clear, sharp edge around the UFO, that it's probably a hoax, and that because the UFOs somehow distort the space around them.
Sure.
And that the lines are kind of fuzzied, whatever. And that's exactly what this is. But it's sharp. The sun's reflected off. It's there, man. It's really good. In fact, he was telling me, he's like, I saw this glint, bright thing above me. And I looked up and I couldn't believe it. And he had a Polaroid camera in his hands because he was taking photographs of his mother's garden to send her pictures. And he, in his haste, he pulled the camera up so fast that he smacked himself in the nose and split his nose open. And blood was coming down his face, but at the same time, he triggered the button and he got the shot.
Now let's move over to Africa from Australia, but obviously one of the most interesting aspects of this, even though we're talking about almost 30 years between the incidents, Westall being in 66. In 1994, what happened in Ruwa, but it was another elementary school with, again, dozens and dozens of students that witnessed this and also communicated with this strange being. What happened in Ruwa? And now you went to Ruwa. You were also able to interview the students who are now adults.
Yes. So I got to be honest with you. The first time I heard about this case is I was just dumb enough to think I could get an interview with Steven Spielberg back in the 90s. I knew someone, we had a mutual friend, this woman named Jenny Yang. And she was like, well, after some time going back and forth, she's like, well, Spielberg's not going to meet with you, but he does want you to know that there was a landing case in Africa that's pretty phenomenal, and I thought, yeah, right. I didn't even believe it. In fact, I didn't even look into it. I dismissed it immediately. And then I heard about it a couple more times over the years. And then I met Randall Nickerson, I think it is. He's doing a film on it. I'm trying to remember the name of the film, but it's just on Rua itself. And I talked to him in 2007. We did the National Press Club event with Leslie Kane. She's a mutual friend. And it sort of got me more interested. And then I looked into it more and more and more. And then, I ended up meeting the witnesses, the children, now adults, bringing them together for the first time with Randall's help, and brought them together for the first time in 20 years. And then I went to Africa and met with more of the witnesses and met with the teacher, who turned out to be a witness as well and lied about it at the time.
What happened? And for the audience, really quick, what happened in Rua?
So there were actually 100 children. People, if you look it up on Wikipedia, it says like 64 or 66. Right. That's how many children actually went in front of the camera and were interviewed. But in terms of how many children were actually in the playground, and I was there, there were over 100. So it was 10:30 in the morning, morning recess. There were roughly 100 children playing, and they were explaining this to me that and it was rural. Rua is outside of Harare, which is the capital of Zimbabwe. There's these logs that they would put that would define the outermost perimeter of the playground, and beyond that was like sort of tall grass and potentially snakes and spiders and nasty things that the children knew not to go. It was groomed, so that they were only allowed to go as far as the logs. And that was it. So the children, of course, being children, would go all the way out to the furthest point possible, and they would dance and skip along these logs. And they saw a UFO. In fact, multiple UFOs, disc-shaped objects that they were all kind of looking at, flying very slowly. And then these UFOs landed. And some of the students say like 2 or 3 or 4, or the numbers vary a little bit, but they all say, yeah, these things landed. And then the next thing they knew, there were these little beings right there at the edge of the playground, right there with them. And the way they described it to me is, if you've ever been out in the wild and you come across a really rare wild animal, and there's a moment of curiosity, of intrigue, of mystery, and there's a standoff where you're looking at one another with curiosity, and there's that sort of time freezes for a moment. It's not aggressive or negative in any way. It's just curious. Like they're looking at you just like you're looking at them with the same level of curiosity, and that's what it was like. And some of the students had told me, and this didn't make it the movie, the children were dancing on these logs at the farthest perimeter of the playground, and the creatures were dancing along with the children in the grass, just next to them, joyfully, playfully dancing. And and then there was some face-to-face contact. Some of them were still with the craft, others were coming, but they would sort of appear and reappear, almost like they were shape-shifting kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Like they were trying to describe what it was like. And to me, it seemed like they would kind of slip in and out of this dimension almost, is what it sounded like. But they would sort of appear and then reappear over here and kind of move around, and they almost floated. And then there was face-to-face contact, and I kept saying, well, how far? I was thinking like maybe they were in the bushes. Like, no, this was like 3 feet away, right there. And they had telepathic messages that were given to the children of being better environmental stewards and that sort of thing.
And they actually described it that way, that they actually communicated, and they probably didn't even know what telepathy was, or this,
no.
But that is, that's what they described to everyone, that they had communication.
Yes, yeah, they had communication, and it's incredible. And Dr. John Mack, Harvard psychiatrist, other interviews as well, but he sat the children down, and then And then you listen to the children then, right after it happened, the archive footage that we have, and then you sit down with them today, 20 years later, and you just won't believe it, man. It's like it happened yesterday when they remember it. And a lot of them hadn't even told their spouses or their husbands about it. It's because they were like, I'm tired of defending this story. I just don't even want to engage. I don't care if you don't, I'm not interested in trying to persuade anybody whether it happened or not. And right down to who's now the head mistress, Judy Bates, is the same thing. It's like this happened. This event happened.
What about the archive footage that was shot before you got there, that whole documentary? Did you get a chance to see any of that?
Yeah, well, we licensed it from the Don Mack Institute.
Okay, because there were reels and reels of footage.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's funny, actually. I bumped into a gentleman on the street, coincidence, who knows, but literally on the sidewalk in Colorado, and he's going, oh, wait a minute, are you, yeah. We start talking. Long story short, back in the 90s, he was working with Dr. John Mack, and they were going to produce a special. It was going to be called, Disturbance, which is what Rua means, disturbance. And Rua is where the incident took place. And the thing kind of fell apart, but he had all these, and then, of course, Dr. John Mack unfortunately died in London, and nothing ever really happened, but he'd been sitting on all these original tapes that he'd had from back then, and he gave them to me, and I had them all transferred, and there was a lot of interviews that were done with locals in and around Harare and Rua that had seen the craft too. So lots of adults had seen. This was an incident that took place over several days, and then the objects eventually decided to land at the school, whatever reason that was. Maybe they felt the children were much more likely to make benign contact. But the objects were witnessed by lots of people in the town, and there was actually, 7 or 8 seconds of a cigar-shaped thing at night that was taking video that we also have.
Very exciting, and I want to talk about
this. You got to
this.
see it. You got to see it.
I can't wait. I know a guy that knows a guy, and hopefully I'll be able to see a rough cut here very soon. And but I'll see what you can do. I want to talk, James, but this other case that there's a lot in the film. We're not giving everything away tonight, and I certainly want to be surprised too as well. But China, the Meng Jiaogua case, which was also surprisingly in 1994. This is another case that most have never heard of. Tell us about that. Actually,
I never, last year I went to China twice, and it was a big deal. And Don Schmidt was really helpful in making that all happen. He had this whole contingent of Chinese researchers that invited us over, and we did a whole sweeping tour of China. We went to Lulian and Dalian and Chongqing, where they were starting a museum for the Roswell case. They're working with Don Schmidt on that, Beijing, and we went, just like I said, planes, trains, and automobiles all across China, and it's amazing. Like there's more Chinese UFO researchers than there are population in the United States. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but
no, you're not. No, you're not. No, you are not. It's amazing.
I was shocked at how many, like the level of professionalism and seriousness. And we had, generals in uniform going around with us, traveling with us. And I had a drone, and you can't fly a drone in China. Like you got to have you go to jail, man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this general was saying, I got funny photographs of us drinking together at night, but he would just tell people, James, fly your drone. So I got all this incredible drone footage all across China with this guy. We got to Dalian, which is the second largest seaport in China, and they had this monument overlooking the city, big city too. And it was the most beautiful sculpture, that you could climb up into. It was massive. I don't know if it was a restaurant inside, but if it wasn't, it could have been. It was huge. Beautiful spiraling staircase that goes up into the belly of a flying saucer. I mean, this flying saucer, if you saw it from not too far away, it looked, without seeing the staircase going up to it at the bottom, I mean, it looks like a absolutely real flying saucer. A multi-million-dollar sculpture, a beautiful thing. that, I was thinking, my God, like, you know, a lot of people take this stuff very seriously, but there was a landing case that took place in 1994. I think it's a Black Forest province. I have to look that one up, but it's Mengjiao Gua, and it was a contact case of an object that looked kind of like a tadpole. We actually have an illustration, something that was done, I think, in the 50s that we have in the film that's very similar to what this thing was described in China. And there was contact made, and this gentleman received telepathic messages about environmental impact, about our environment, chilling similarities as what happened with the children in Rua.
Right.
Incredible. Really incredible. And it was really incredible. And I met with lots of other witnesses throughout different regions in China that had pretty phenomenal cases and telepathic communication with these things. And sometimes it might not have been face-to-face contact with beings, but they'd see a craft and have a message.
Did you get a chance to meet Chuck Fay?
Chuck Fay? I don't think I did.
Chuck Fay, he's a radio host over there. His radio show is called MJ13.
No way.
Oh, you don't? You didn't meet Chuck. Chuck's the Art Bell of China. And I'm not saying that in a funny ha way. He is the bleeping Art Bell of China, and an amazing individual, and knows so much about. And he comes over to the United States and he does this thing over here, and he goes to the conferences. He's got his team and his documentary crew, and he's got an incredible infrastructure. He's just got a great TV show and radio program, and he's out of Hong Kong. I met some other researchers from Hong Kong. I didn't go to Hong Kong, but I met some people that were from Hong Kong. You would know Chuck Fay.
Chuck Fay. I didn't have time. We spent 3 weeks over there. We went back again to Chongqing. What a big city that is. And they had an opening of a replica of the Roswell Museum in New Mexico, in Chongqing, China.
Why do you think China is so open to the subject? It's pretty fascinating. I mean, I think that the government, they control everything over there, but they are okay.
Gene Weijiao was the guy that we dealt with, the head of the International UFO Research, and he was telling me that in order to have an organization like he has, you have to have a stamp of approval, certification from the government.
Right.
And so that's sort of a tacit acceptance of a validation of your business or your organization. So they didn't say, I guess the way he was explaining it to me was that, they allow him to do what he's doing because they believe in what he's doing and believe it's necessary. And the fact that we had an active general in uniform going around with us was amazing. I mean, would you ever see that in the States?
Nope.
An active general, not retired, active in uniform?
I can't imagine that going down in China. Forget about the United States.
I couldn't believe it either, man. It was remarkable. In fact, there's so much stuff that's going to end up at the edit room floor. We are 2.5 hours long right now. We need to cut 30 minutes out of this movie. We're not going to cut China section out, but I think what we're probably going to do, and we've talked about this for some time now, is do an 8-part miniseries for Netflix after this, because there's so much stuff on the edit room floor that we can't get it all in.
What you could do, cut Peter Coyote out, and then I could
replace him with Jimmy Church.
Hey, James, I know that you're in the middle of editing. I understand that, and you're working. Can I keep you for one more segment? One more segment, James.
Yes.
You're the best.
Yes.
I knew you. I just knew it. Yeah, let's take a break.
Last one, but really, I'm going to the studio tonight.
You know what? Blame me. That's it. I'll be the fall guy. Our guest tonight is James Fox, talking about his new film, The Phenomenon. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You have just listened to a full hour free preview of Fade to Black. To get the full show, all archives, just go to our podcast section at jimmychurchradio.com. You can also sign up to be a Fadernaut in our membership area, where we have downloadable MP3s. Go to jimmychurchradio.com. Go Bagley Tappy.